"Gentlemen, this is a robbery," said one of the two most infamous art criminals in history, as they handcuffed and tied up the two security guards on duty in the basement of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. A short 81 minutes later, and these opportunistic criminals made off with 13 pieces of art valued at approximately $600 million in what remains the largest art robbery in history. In the early hours of March 18th, 1990, two individuals disguised as police officers entered the hallowed halls of the museum, leaving behind a trail of empty frames and shattered security measures. The stolen works include masterpieces by Vermeer, Rembrandt, and other renowned artists, and remain missing to this day. Every day, museum-goers are reminded of this audacious heist through the empty frames that hang eerily on the walls. The museum is desperate to have these frames full once more, and are offering a $10 million reward to anyone who provides information leading directly to the art's safe return. One thing that is certain: there is someone out there who knows who pulled off the heist and who knows where these treasures are today. Welcome to Lost Treasures. I'm Tim, and this is the lost treasure of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist. Just quickly before I roll titles, it would mean the absolute world if you could subscribe to my channel. Thank you. So how did just two people pull off the largest art heist in history? In the early hours of March 18th, 1990, two cunning individuals initiated an audacious plan to infiltrate the museum. Disguised as police officers, they gained entry to the museum by convincing the unsuspecting security guards that they were responding to a fire alarm or other distress call. Once inside, the guards were handcuffed and left tied up in the museum's basement, rendering them unable to intervene as the heist unfolded. According to the report from the museum, one of the guards broke the museum's protocol and allowed the officers through the employee entrance of the building. After subduing the guards in under 15 minutes and threatening them by stating that they knew where they lived, the thieves moved on to execute their heist at 1:35 in the morning. The thieves' movements were first recorded in the Dutch room, which was on the second floor around 1:48 a.m. When the criminals approached the paintings, the warning alarms for people who stood too close to the artworks went off, but the thieves simply smashed it. From this room, they stole a painting by Rembrandt, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, 1633, by smashing it on the marble floor to break the glass frame, and thereafter they removed the canvas from the stretcher using a blade. Along with this Rembrandt work, they also took a self-portrait, but left it standing against a cabinet, presumably due to it being too large to transport. In place of this, they stole a mini self-portrait, also by Rembrandt, dated circa 1633, which was exhibited under the larger one. It was clear that the thieves knew the value of Rembrandt artwork. Other works taken from the Dutch room include The Concert, 1664, by Vermeer, Landscape with Obelisk, 1638, by Hover Flink, and the oldest item dating back to the 12th century, the Chinese gu vessel by an unknown artist. The thieves split up, and one of them entered the short gallery, which was located on the far end of the second floor. When the thieves' partner finished in the Dutch room, he joined his accomplice in the short gallery, where the duo attempted to steal the Napoleonic flag. They did not succeed in this effort, however, but they did steal the eagle finial, which was mounted on the pole of the flag. Here, they also grabbed 5 sketches by Edgar Degas and another famous artwork from the Blue Room called Ches Tortoni, 1875, by Edouard Manet. Before the heist ended, the thieves did check on the guards to ensure they were comfortable and alluded to their intention of solely grabbing the works without a hassle and without harm. They attempted to cover their tracks by taking with them the video cassettes that contained a record of their entrance and data printouts from the motion detectors. However, the information still remained on the hard drive, which was left behind. It is assumed that Ches Tortoni was the last artwork to be snatched, since the painting's frame was found abandoned at the security director's desk. The dynamic duo then moved the artworks out of the museum between 2:40 and 2:45 a.m. They, along with the stolen art, have never been found. Security guards who showed up later that morning discovered the precarious situation and called the security director, who then showed up at the museum and called the police once he found that no guards were at the watch desk. The police arrived on the scene and searched the building, where they found the overnight guards tied up in the basement. So was there a reason why the criminals targeted the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, besides the highly valuable collection of artwork? The museum, located in Boston, Massachusetts, was established by and in the name of art collector Isabella Stewart Gardner, who amassed a superb art collection. The museum opened in 1903 in a Venetian-inspired palazzo designed to replicate the atmosphere of a European palace. Whilst the museum spent time and money increasing its fine art collection to delight and inspire visitors, a series of events and decisions may lead one to conclude that the museum was an easy target for a robbery. The FBI discovered a conspiracy by local Boston criminals to loot the museum. The museum was alerted to this threat in 1982. In response, the museum ramped up its security and installed 60 infrared motion detectors and a closed-circuit TV system containing 4 surveillance devices around the museum's perimeter. Unfortunately, no cameras were installed in the interior of the building, since this was considered too expensive by the Board of Trustees. In an effort to balance this lack of security, the museum hired more guards and installed a button at the front desk which called the police in the case of an emergency. A common security feature for other museums at the time was a fail-safe system, which involved the night guards placing hourly phone calls to the police to inform them that the museum was secure. In retrospect, this would have been a better system for the museum. However, a review by an independent security consultant stated that the museum was up to scratch with its security, but still could use more improvements. By 1988, the museum's finances were still struggling, and at some point, even the security director from the Boston Museum of Fine Arts recommended inputs for a security upgrade. Unfortunately, the requests were denied, along with the salary raise for the security guards, for the purpose of attracting better qualified individuals. This implied that the position was occupied by those who were not necessarily fit for emergency situations, like an armed heist. This combination of poor security technology and potentially undertrained staff is likely one of the reasons why it just took 2 people to pull off the largest art heist in history. A total of 13 artworks were stolen from the museum, and in the year 2000, the estimated value of the missing works rose from $200 million to $500 million. Later that year, the value was estimated to be around $600 million. The value is likely to be even higher today. The artworks stolen from the Dutch Room were considered the most valuable, with Vermeer's painting of the concert sitting at an estimated $250 million. In 2015, experts believed the painting may have been the most valuable stolen object in the world. The thieves aimed to steal very specific works, as seen in the theft of Rembrandt's only existing seascape, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, which had an estimated worth of $140 million. The small self-portrait of Rembrandt had already been stolen before and was returned in 1970, only to be stolen again in 1990. A total of 3 Rembrandt works were stolen: The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, his small self-portrait, and finally A Lady and Gentleman in Black. It is believed that the thieves stole the landscape with obelisk by Flink, believing that it was a 4th Rembrandt piece. The Chinese gu, despite being the oldest item from the Shang dynasty era, carried a smaller value of approximately several $1,000s. All the sketches by Degas that were taken were all works on paper executed in charcoal, ink, pencil and washes. The total combined value of these drawings was around $100,000. The 25-centimetre tall Imperial Eagle from the Napoleon Imperial Guards flag was also stolen. The museum currently offers a separate reward of $100,000 for any information on the object's return. Experts who reviewed the thieves' selection of artworks were left confused, since they stole a combination of artworks of varied values and overlooked other high-value artworks by masters such as Michelangelo and Raphael. The thieves never crossed the 3rd floor, where the most valuable painting hung, The Rape of Europa, 1560 to 1562, by Titian. Let's now explore the events after the heist, including some of the key suspects and leads. The Statute of Limitations, which was a law passed to set the maximum time after an event within which legal proceedings may be initiated, expired in 1995. Because of this, prosecutors have declared that anyone who willingly returns the stolen artworks and who partook in the 1990 art heist would not be prosecuted. At the time of the heist, the FBI assumed control of the case due to the concern that the artworks had great potential to have been transported across state lines. The thieves committed a clean heist and left behind no traces of DNA or prints for police to analyse. The fingerprints at the scene were especially unreliable, as it was inconclusive as to whether they belonged to employees, visitors, or the thieves themselves. Despite this, over the years the FBI have identified a long list of suspects who have been investigated. This is partly due to the support of witnesses in the area, providing a description of who they believed to be the criminals. However, no one has been convicted to this day. The suspects investigated include one of the security guards present at the heist, Rick Abath, leader of the Winter Hill gang, Whitey Bulger, Brian McDevitt, and various members and associates of the Molino gang, as well as Bobby Donati, who is considered by many to be the most likely culprit. There has also been an anonymous letter to the museum from someone who claimed to be a third-party negotiator on behalf of the thieves, who wanted to return the artwork in exchange for payment. Let's start with security guard Rick Abath, who was investigated at an early stage because of his suspicious behaviour on the night of the theft. Whilst on patrol, Abath briefly opened and closed a side door, a move that some believe could have been a signal to the thieves parked outside. Abath told authorities that he opened and closed the door routinely to ensure that it was locked. One of Abath's colleagues told journalists that if Abath had opened the door routinely, as he maintains, supervisors would have noticed him doing so from their computer printouts and stopped the behaviour. Abath maintains his innocence, and one of the FBI agents overseeing the case concluded that the guard was too incompetent and foolish to have committed the crime. Moving on to Whitey Bulger. Whitey Bulger was one of the most powerful crime bosses in Boston during the era, heading the Winter Hill gang. He denied involvement and in fact dispatched his subordinates to identify the culprits because the robbery was committed within his area and he wanted to be paid tribute. The FBI investigated Bulger to determine his involvement. They determined that Bulger's strong ties with the Boston police could explain how the thieves acquired legitimate police uniforms, or perhaps that real police were arranged to perform the heist. Bulger also had ties to the Irish Republican Army, the IRA. The FBI noticed that the act of tripping the fire alarm before the heist was a typical calling card of the IRA, who had previously demonstrated the capability to organise art heists. The FBI's investigation of Bulger and the IRA did not produce any evidence to tie them to the theft. According to a retired art and antiquities investigator for Scotland Yard, Bulger gave the Gardner works to the IRA and they are most likely in Ireland. I previously mentioned an anonymous letter. In 1994, museum director Anne Hawley received an anonymous letter that included information only supposedly known by the museum, the FBI, and the thieves at the time. The writer explained that they were a third-party negotiator and did not know the identity of the thieves. They explained that the artwork was stolen to reduce a prison sentence, but as the opportunity had passed, and as there was no longer a motive to keep the artwork, they wanted to negotiate a return. They wanted immunity for themselves and all others involved, and $2.6 million, which would be sent to an offshore bank account at the same time the art was handed over. Finally, the letter said that if the museum was interested in negotiating, they should print a coded message in the Boston Globe newspaper. The FBI, who considered this to be a strong lead, contacted the Globe, and the coded message was printed on the May 1st, 1994 edition of the Boston Globe. Hawley, the museum director, received a second letter a few days later, in which the writer acknowledged the museum was interested in negotiating, but that they had become fearful of what they perceived was a massive investigation by federal and state authorities to determine their identity. The writer explained that they needed time to evaluate their options, but Hawley never heard from the writer again. Moving on to the next suspect, Brian McDevitt. Brian McDevitt was a con man from Boston who tried to rob the Hyde collection in Glens Falls, New York in 1981. He dressed up as a FedEx driver, carried handcuffs and duct tape, and planned to steal a Rembrandt. He was also a known flag aficionado and fit the description of the larger robber, except for his thinning red hair. These parallels to the Gardner case fascinated the FBI, so they interviewed him in late 1990. McDevitt denied any involvement and refused to take a polygraph test. The FBI ran his fingerprints, which did not match any of those at the crime scene. I mentioned the FBI suspected the involvement of the Molino gang. Among those associated with the Molino gang was Robert Guarente and Robert Gentile. Guarente died from cancer in 2004, but his widow told the FBI in 2010 that her husband had previously owned some of the paintings. She claimed that when her husband got sick with cancer in the early 2000s, he gave the paintings to Gentile for safekeeping. Gentile denied the accusations, claiming he was never given them and knew nothing of their whereabouts. Federal authorities indicted Gentile on drug charges in 2012, which has been widely regarded as an attempt to pressure Gentile for information about the Gardner works. He submitted to a polygraph test, which indicated he was lying, when he denied any knowledge of the theft or location of the artwork. Gentile maintained he was telling the truth and demanded a retest. During the retest, he said his wife had once shown him the missing Rembrandt self-portrait, to which the polygraph machine indicated he was telling the truth. Gentile's lawyer felt that the veracity of Gentile's claims were being affected by the large presence of federal agents, and requested a smaller meeting in hopes that it would get Gentile to speak honestly. In the more intimate meeting, Gentile maintained that he did not have any information. A few days later, the FBI stormed Gentile's house with a search warrant. The FBI found a secret ditch beneath a false floor in the backyard shed, but found it empty. Gentile's son explained that the ditch flooded a few years prior, and his father was upset about whatever was stored there. In the basement, they found a copy of the Boston Herald from March 1990, reporting the theft, along with a piece of paper indicating what each piece might sell for on the black market. Gentile was eventually sent to prison for 30 months on drug charges. After getting out of prison, he spoke with an investigative reporter, Stephen Kirkjian, claiming he was framed by the FBI. He also explained that the list found in his basement was written up by a criminal trying to broker the return of the works from Guarente, and was talking to Gentile as an intermediary. And finally, we reach Bobby Donati, regarded as one of the most likely suspects of orchestrating the heist. Donati was murdered in 1991 in the midst of a gang war within the Patriarca crime family. His involvement in the Gardner theft was suspected after notorious New England art thief Miles Connor Jr. spoke with authorities. Connor was in jail at the time of the heist, but he believed Donati and criminal David Houghton were the masterminds. David Houghton was dating Connor's sister and was motivated to steal the artwork in order to negotiate a release for him. Connor had worked with Donati in past art heists and claimed the two cased the Gardner Museum, where Donati took interest in the eagle finial that was stolen. Connor also claimed that Houghton visited him in jail after the heist and said that he and Donati organised it and were going to use the paintings to get Connor out of jail. If this is true, they likely borrowed the idea from Connor, as he had returned stolen pieces of art to reduce sentences in the past. Connor told investigators he could assist in returning the Gardner works in exchange for the museum's posted reward and his freedom. When investigators did not give in to Connor's demands because of a lack of evidence, he suggested they speak with criminal and antiques dealer William Youngworth. Acting on Connor's lead, the FBI opened a case on Youngworth and conducted raids on his home and antique store properties in the 1990s. The raids caught the attention of journalist Tom Mashberg, who began talking with Youngworth in 1997 about the theft. One night in August 1997, Youngworth called Mashberg and told him he had proof he could return the Gardner paintings under the right conditions. That night, Youngworth picked up Mashberg from the Boston Herald offices and drove him to a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Youngworth led him inside to a storage unit with several large cylinder tubes. He removed one painting from its tube, unfurled it, and showed it to Mashberg under flashlight. It appeared to Mashberg to be the storm on the Sea of Galilee. He noticed cracking along the canvas, and the edges were cut in a manner consistent with the museum's reports, as well as Rembrandt's signature on the ship's rudder. Mashberg wrote about his experience in the Boston Herald, leaving out details to hide Youngworth's identity and the painting's location. He reported that his informant, presumably Youngworth, told him the robbery was pulled off by 5 men and identified 2, Donati as one of the robbers and Houghton as being responsible for moving the art to a safe house. The FBI discovered the location of the warehouse several months later and raided it, but found nothing. The veracity of Youngworth's claims and the authenticity of the painting shown to Mashberg is disputed. Youngworth supplied paint chips to Mashberg, and federal authorities reported that they were indeed from Rembrandt's era, but did not match oils used for the storm on the Sea of Galilee. The way Mashberg described the painting as being unfurled has also been scrutinised, as the stolen painting was covered with a heavy varnish that would not roll easily. Federal authorities and the museum began working with Youngworth after Mashberg's story was published, but Youngworth made negotiations difficult. He would not work with authorities unless his demands could be met, which included full immunity and Connor's release from jail. The authorities were sceptical of Youngworth's veracity and only offered partial immunity. The United States attorney overseeing the case eventually ceased talks with Youngworth unless he could provide more reliable evidence that he had access to the Gardner works. Youngworth again provided a vial of paint chips, purportedly from the storm on the Sea of Galilee, and 25 colour photographs of the painting, as well as photographs of a lady and gentleman in black. A joint statement from the museum and federal investigators announced that the chips were not from the stolen Rembrandts, though they did test as being from 17th century paintings and could potentially be from the concert. In 2014, investigative reporter Stephen Kirkjian wrote to gangster Vincent Ferrara, Donati's supervisor during the gang war, inquiring if he had information about the Gardner theft. He received a call back from an associate of Ferrara, who explained the FBI was wrong in suspecting the Molino gang's involvement, and claimed that Donati organised the robbery. The caller explained that Donati visited Ferrara in jail about 3 months before the theft, after the latter was charged for murder, and told Ferrara that he was going to do something to get him out of jail. 3 months later, Ferrara heard news about the Gardner theft, after which Donati visited him again and confirmed to Ferrara that he was involved in the robbery. He claimed to have buried the artwork and would start a negotiation for his release once the investigation cooled down. The negotiations never occurred because Donati was murdered. Kirkshian believes Donati was motivated to free Ferrara from prison because Ferrara could protect him in the gang war. A friend of Guarente, the Molino gang associate, also corroborated that Donati organised the robbery and that Donati gave paintings to Guarente when he became concerned for his own safety. Donati was close friends with Guarente. The two were seen at the social club in Vermeer shortly before the robbery with a bag of police uniforms. And this brings us to the end. We covered how the audacious heist unfolded, the museum failings that facilitated the heist, the artwork stolen, and the key suspects. The heist continues to captivate the imagination of people worldwide. As the investigation persists and new leads emerge, the art world continues to hope that the stolen works will one day be recovered and returned to their rightful place. The $10 million reward offered for information leading to the recovery of the stolen art serves as a constant reminder and motivation to find out what happened to these precious treasures. Thank you for joining me. Who do you think stole the art? Let me know in the comments below. Also make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Until next time, thank you.